Welcome back and prepare to be bedazzled, because today I'm going to be shining light on why I should always be profusely applying to real private sector employee jobs based on voluntary demand. If you currently have an employee job, are not going to work as an entrepreneur, and do not have enough money to be able to afford to retire. So why does this happen to be the case, you may ask? Without further ado, without further delay, without further procrastination, allow me to demystify the answer to that inquiry right here, right now. Lamentably, much to my dismay, much to my consternation, much to my chagrin, much to my grief, much to my agony, much to my agitation, much to my irritation, most real private sector employee jobs based on voluntary demand are often deemed to be dead-end, highly time-depleting, debilitating, minimum wage, dispiriting, unfulfilling, undesirable, harrowing, distressful, brutally wretched, and ineffably agonizing jobs that not only dispossess an employee out of almost of his sacrosanct time, but that also do not furnish him with anywhere close to even 1/4 of a subsistence wage for affording housing. Furthermore, most real private sector employee jobs based on voluntary demand do not provide any benefits nor any pensions to the real private sector employees who work them. Additionally, most real private sector employee jobs based on voluntary demand do not provide any semblance of job security nor job stability to the real private sector employees who work them. Moreover, if real private sector employee jobs based on voluntary demand are your only source of income, then it will provide you with a 0% chance to attain financial stability and a 0% chance to attain financial security. Most of the profits that companies generate are reserved for the shareholders in tandem with executives. If you're not a part of that niche cohort, then you will aptly receive a minimum wage as your hourly wage if you work for a real private sector employer, and if the real private sector employer does not renege on his obligation to furnish you with remuneration for the labor that you provided him. At any given moment, on a whim, you can abruptly get terminated from your real private sector employee position, irrespective of how stupendous, extraordinary, meritorious, and stellar your performance was as a real private sector employee. So, search for real private sector employee jobs that are eminently in line with your core competencies and that are willing to provide you with the maximum amount of remuneration per hour. If you're going to abstain, desist, and refrain from pursuing entrepreneurial pursuits, and if you do not have enough fiat currency to be able to afford to retire, then it would behoove you to ascertain which real private sector employee jobs provide the maximum amount of remuneration per hour. You want to be able to maximize your emolument as a real private sector employee, and for every additional dollar that a real private sector employer is willing to provide you per hour, then it will culminate in you earning an additional $2,080 in gross revenue per year, presuming that you were to be pursuant of that position on a full-time basis. If you could pivot to working for a real private sector employer who's willing to pay you $5 more per hour, then it will culminate in you earning $10,400 more in gross revenue per year, presuming that you are amenable to working that real private sector employee job based on voluntary demand on a full-time basis. If you can find a real private sector employer who's willing to pay you $10 more per hour, then it can culminate in you earning $20,800 more in gross revenue per year, presuming that you're amenable to working that real private sector employee job based on voluntary demand on a full-time basis. So even if you transition to working a real private sector employee job based on voluntary demand that pays you $3 more per hour than the hourly wage that your former real private sector employer was offering you, then it can culminate in you earning $6,240 more per hour, presuming that you are amenable to working that real private sector employee job based on voluntary demand on a full-time basis. So if you're going to be expending your precious, invaluable, finite, non-replenishable, indispensable, sacrosanct time for a pittance of fiat currency, and you want to be able to do so at the highest possible hourly wage that can be furnished to you by a real private sector employer, if you are not going to be pursuant of entrepreneurial pursuits. If you're going to be pursuant of entrepreneurial pursuits, then you can set forth your own hourly rate. If you offer consulting services to clients or coaching services to clients. So even though the employer sets forth the hourly rate, you do not need to acquiesce to working most real private sector employee jobs based on voluntary demand. You could strive to find one that pays a wage that is above the minimum wage threshold. It may be cumbersome to ascertain employee job opportunities from real private sector employers that pay above the minimum wage pay grade, but it is possible to procure one if you are profusely applying to tens of thousands of real private sector employee jobs based on voluntary demand. So, I hope that you deem this video to be riveting, captivating, mesmerizing, insightful, enthralling, engrossing, and amusing. I hope that you're entrenched in the underlying epicness. Before it eludes me, I just wanted to mention that if you have extreme fame leverage as a consultant, then your hourly rate can be far higher than what almost all real private sector employers would be amenable to paying you. Some consultants charge over $500 per hour. Thanks for watching. Have a blissful day. Goodbye.